Welcome to a Drafthouse Diary for Sunday, October 6th, 2022, when the bar box next to the Alamo Drafthouse at Aspen Grove was featuring goat yoga. We were not here for the goat yoga. Instead, we were here for the 1922 NOSFERATU.
I think everyone's glad that we weren't here for the Chupacabra movie.
NOSFERATU. The 1922 German silent version of this adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And with me once again is Ian Porter from Item Crafting and from the Intermillennium Media Project podcast.
Yes. My goodness, this was a different take.
Yeah, we've seen a few versions of Dracula, a few adaptations now, and this was very, very distinct.
Very distinct. And there's stuff that's like, it's definitely inspired by, I can see all the structure of the original story, but it takes all those pieces and changes their order, changes their relationship to each other, and kind of builds, I'd say, its own narrative, more so than other adaptations would.
Yeah, I've got thoughts about this that kind of break down into three parts. One is the filmmaking. This is 1922 silent filmmaking. Murnau is the director, and for its time, it is very sophisticated filmmaking. They're using the visual language that they've established in really interesting ways. It also brings to mind to me how quickly we went from cinema as a way to depict life in motion, to give you a moving image of the real world, and how quickly filmmakers added to that a drive to depict what is not real, to give the unreal the semblance of reality by filming it and using cinematic tricks to do that.
Absolutely. I found it fascinating how the combination of stop motion, overlay, day for night, a couple of things that we think of as a little bit later than this is showing up here in this earlier cinema to really gather and grab onto some of that, that fictional element and drag it into the environments that they've depicted. And the shots they had were brilliant. The establishing shot of the town is this sort of high angle, low perspective, like perspective down, like grabbing these shots that I'm thinking of, like, it made me remember shots from John Wick films. And I'm like, what?
Yes.
This is wild, but it's doing that same stuff with Gothic architecture, just grabbing that looming presence.
Yeah, the visual language of movies, and also the dynamic language of movies in terms of movement and such. It goes back 100 years or more.
Exactly.
And your point about stop motion was really good, because we've talked in various settings about how stop motion can give something a physicality, but it also, because it's not quite real seeming, it gives something that air of unreality and magic. This was a great early example of that. So much of the large-scale movement that we see happening with Count Orlov, aka NOSFERATU, it's done in this choppy, frames-missing stop motion, which makes it seem weird and magical and just dreamlike. The other aspect that I wanted to talk about, apart from the cinematography, is also the story.
Yes.
It's a very different take on the story structure from Bram Stoker. Most of the adaptations of Bram Stoker, they want to get you to the end site as quickly as possible. They want to give you the setup, but then get you to London so you can deal with what happens when Dracula gets there and his confrontations with Harker and with Van Helsing. And this one spent most of its time with the real estate agent going to Transylvania and dealing with Count Orlov in Orlov's castle.
Yeah, I'm going to give a summary of this story very quickly here, which depicts it in a way that sounds way more modern YouTube show than it is. Young finance bro real estate agent does not realize that his boss is crazy and sending him on a bad job. But he's too much of a golden retriever to ignore the potential for the good things for him and his wife. And his goth wife keeps telling him it's a bad idea. He goes anyway, meets a really weird old man, who says, yeah, I'll become your next door neighbor. Getting back home, the entire town is put on quarantine lockdown because creepy things keep happening. And his goth wife says, well, I've read the book that you brought home. The only way to deal with this is for me to handle it and die. Sorry, honey. And she saves everyone's butt and they don't realize it. The end. That is, spoiler, I'm sorry for spoilers, but that is the story. And that depiction is, I'm almost frustrated with how on the nose I can summarize it there. I will also make one side note. Our main character, our real estate agent, why does this actor look like a young Michael Cera?
He does. He very much looks like a Michael
Scarily
Cera
so.
from 1922 Germany.
Yes.
And I would differ from you a little bit in terms of describing him as kind of a greedy junior finance bro. Because he's going to this mysterious place of Transylvania, and his boss is telling him that it's a land of phantoms and thieves. And he goes to his wife and is like, seems very happy. I'm going on a long trip to the land of phantoms and thieves.
It's like, that's why
And then we find that he's brought with him a book about vampires and all of these things.
He didn't bring it with him. He picked it up at like the free little library at the hotel he went to.
He got it at the hotel.
He's like,
and he's thrilled to get it.
This is where I'm like, he's got golden retriever energy. This is a work trip. Yeah, it's expensed. Ooh, I'll pick up a book. Oh, this is silly.
And I kept thinking of that book as the player's guide.
Yes.
You've got the player's guide. Either use it or don't, but don't keep dipping into it and then ignoring what it tells you. Because it's telling you what a NOSFERATU is and how it works. And he's like waking up in the morning with wounds on his neck. And it's like, oh, this is what the NOSFERATU does. And he says, oh, well, that's an interesting coincidence, these weird mosquitoes.
Exactly.
Come on, Hutter. You're a little smarter than that, I would hope, but maybe not.
No, he's not. It just goes right past him every time.
The story stayed compelling, even in a silent form, and it was a good soundtrack, a good orchestral soundtrack with this edition. But there were some things that were frustrating about the characters. No more so than in movies that I've seen this year.
It's notable when in the quiet of the Alamo Cinema, you can hear a facepalm. And that happened at least once.
Also, thinking about this movie in the context of it being the product of Germany in 1922, it is very, very hard to see this and not see it as anti-migrant propaganda.
Yes.
Because this nice town is threatened by the arrival of someone from another country. And it's not just that. The specific iconography they used to, the way that Count Orloff, NOSFERATU, is portrayed, the large nose and long fingers, it is exactly the kind of iconography you see over the course of Germany in the next 10 to 20 years in anti-Semitic cartoons and the like. So it's sobering to see that in cinema from the early 1920s, that these were things that didn't happen out of nowhere in the late 20s or early 30s. It was brewing before then, and the propaganda that became more prevalent in the late 20s and 30s, it drew upon horror imagery to depict the people it wanted to depict as evil, to depict Jews as evil, because, see, they look like these things from horror movies that you saw when you were a kid.
It is important whenever discussing media to remember that media exists in context.
Yeah.
You need to look at it in context, you need to look at it out of context, and you need to look at it across context overall. And for this is a fundamental piece of cinema that affected the way things are shot. This has affected the way horror movies are written and depicted from here on out. But at the same time, we've got to acknowledge the issues therein and the problems that this had in its time and what it was doing and saying at that moment. Not just what was taken from it later, what was recovered from the negative elements for the rest of cinema to be able to do things with. It has major issues built right in, and we can't ignore that.
But it's still worth seeing, both for its own sake and for its historical point.
Mm-hmm.
Other parts of our trip to the Alamo. There was a pre-show. There was nothing new about this pre-show. I don't know that it was exactly the same edit that we have seen in front of other vampire-related movies, but every single piece of it was something I'd seen in other pre-shows. Everything from Svengoolie, horror movie, TV show promos and intros to commercials for cereals and kids' products involving monsters, lots of Dracula movie and some Frankenstein movie trailers.
Yeah, the Alamo has a vampire movie pre-roll, and they will occasionally switch some stuff up in it, maybe change the order, but it's going to be the same pool that they're always building their generic vampire set starter with.
So it was a fine pre-show for this movie.
Oh, yes.
You wind up seeing the same thing over and over again if you go to the Alamo a lot. But again, they tend to fit them to the movie pretty well.
Oh, yeah.
We did get some food, didn't quite get meals, but I got a Guinness. I probably should have gotten a German beer, but Guinness is what sounded good. And I got some of their mozzarella sticks, which are always good. They do a good job with those.
Nice
What do you have, Ian?
I got one of my favorite go-tos in terms of a medium light thing, which is their avocado toast with bacon. It's not as heavy as a lot of their entrees, but it's a little bit more than their appetizer. It's right there in the middle. I think it's a great bite. I also tried to order a shake, but apparently their shake machine was down.
Oh.
I'm hoping that is, for maintenance and cleaning and such, but I know that for a lot of restaurants, when a shake machine goes down, that can be a long-term thing. So I'm hoping the best for them back in the kitchen there.
Yep.
Instead, I got their chocolate chip cookies to have a little bit of a sweet thing at the end. And honestly, they were not bad. I've had worse. This time they were a little crispy on the edge. Their oven was a little strong on them, but they came out nice and warm and fresh, and they were a nice amount of a sweet bite at the end there.
Yeah, I like their chocolate chip cookies.
Yeah.
I tend to prefer crisper cookies, and these tend to go softer, but they're still good. They're heavy, but they're good.
That's right.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this Drafthouse Diary. If you did, please click the like button, and if you want to see more of these as they come out, please click subscribe. And you can find Ian at itemcrafting.com, and you can find me at bymatthewporter.com. I'll be back soon with more. In the meantime, enjoy your movies, and when you do, stay till the end of the credits.